Good evening, everyone. This is the Zoning Board of Appeals for January 13th, 2016. We've got three items on our agenda this evening. The last is actually going to be taken off, but we forgot to put the minutes on. So I will move to add the minutes to our agenda. A second? All in favor? All right. So could the appropriate people please review February 11th and September 9th. For the 11th, these have been long outstanding, but we just lack the proper people to vote on these. And I read these in advance and did not see any changes necessary. Okay, we've got Bruce. Do we have John or Jeremy? Or Paul?
From here?
I was, February 11th was I?
February 11th. Yes, you were here. You voted.
Yes. No, I'm looking for one.
I approve. You good? Okay. So we're good with no corrections on February 11th.
Okay.
Nope.
And September 9th? I am good
That's
with,
this one.
I am good with those as well.
I wasn't present.
I was, I approve.
And you're good?
I'm good.
Okay, so those are approved. And our first item on the agenda is a public hearing on an application filed by Christina Griffin, Architect PC, as agent for 552 Corporation for 3 variances to construct a new 10-unit, 3-story multifamily building on the property located at 255 Broadway. Who'll be heard?
Christina Griffin. Hi.
Good evening.
How are you? I'm the architect for the proposed 10 units on the site. This building is going to be replacing an old building that's in deteriorating shape right now. This is a 3D view of the proposed 3-story building. And we're here to ask for 3 variances. One, for lot coverage. We have a building coverage of 31.7%, the maximum of 30% is allowed. 2, front yard setback to the decks, and 3, for using 2 spots on the street for parking and payment in lieu for the use of those public spaces that can be used for the parking that we need for the project. This is our site plan. This shows the location of the building and also the garage layout. We wanted to conceal most of the parking in the building. So we're making use of the existing curb cut, except we're widening it to 16 feet. And we're going to have access down the driveway into the garage, and then also to outdoor parking in the back of the building. This way you wouldn't be able to see any of the cars from the front, from Broadway. Our lot coverage is slightly over simply because our goal is to have an outdoor space for each of the units. And because of the decks that we have in the front and the back, and they're very they're very limited in size, but we still are just over the 30% lot coverage. And these decks, this deck and the decks that are actually above, they don't touch the ground. They cantilever above, starting at the first floor. This site plan is showing a setback. It's hard to see here, but the other variance we're asking for is the front yard setback, which is based on the prevailing setback. And the prevailing setback that we had on our data chart was 28. Everything was a little blurry, 20.5 feet, I believe, and we have to the decks 25 feet. Actually, we took a really really hard look at how we came up with those, and I wanted to pass this out because it looks like we recalculated the, I have a few copies of this. The front yard prevailing setback, I'm just going to keep one, and in the Duxbury zoning code, the prevailing setback is the lesser of A, the average of the existing front yard setback of properties on either side of the subject property, or B, the average of the existing front yard setback of each lot on the block face on which the subject property is located. But in no case shall a property be more than 500 feet from the subject property or within a setback of more than 50 feet be included in the calculations. If you look at our calculations we did, we came up for A, without, I actually have a, I think I'm going to go to a, here we have a neighborhood plan showing the properties on the block. This is what I would consider the block face, and there's 5 properties here. And the first calculation is based on the average of the existing front yard setbacks on the properties on each side, but we can't count this one because it has more than a 50-foot setback, and we are at 41.9 feet, so that's the greater. The lesser of the is actually B, is when we take the average of all 5 properties and we, without counting, again, we cannot count this one because it's set back more than 50 feet. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 255, 211, 6 Chestnut Court. I think this might be missing one, but anyway, we have an average of 23.4 feet. So right now, the setback to the deck is 25 feet, so we are very close to the prevailing setback. We might even be more than what's required.
And you're very close to the existing footprint, the footprint of the front yard setback of the existing structure, is that right?
Exactly, and actually, what we decided to do is to start at that point. We didn't want the building to come any further than that, than the existing building, and there was a number of reasons for that. We really liked having that green space in front. I mean, that's the main reason, plus we really weren't, for the 10 units, we really didn't need the building to get any larger than it is. And then the variance required for parking is based on seeking approval for using these 2 spaces that are on North Broadway. And we were required to have 13 spaces. We had 11 total in the underground garage and the parking in the back, and we need 2 more to add up to 13. And we actually made sure that we kept the driveway on the side so that we could retain those parking spaces in the front. This is just a comparison of the coverage that exists now in the proposed building. This is the existing building driveway and pool that we're going to remove. And we have a streetscape. A lot of these drawings were done for the planning board and also for the architectural review board. We've designed the building to be similar in height and scale to the building just south, at least in this with regard to the front facade. So landscaping plan we did for the planning board. These are our floor plans in case you'd like to see how these are laid out. We have, not on the basement level, but starting on units in the back. And those decks cantilever out, they don't touch the ground. And then at the second and third floors, we have decks in the front that are only 6 feet out by about 15 feet, and the decks in the back. And because of the decks, we couldn't make the building fit within the 30% lot coverage. But this variance is quite insignificant, it's just 1.7% more maximum. And these are just our color schemes that we did when we went in front of the architectural review board. We've been in front of them twice now. And we need to see if we can get our variances before we can go back to the site view. And then these are just before and afters to show this is the existing 2.5-story building. It's proposed 3-story building. Before and after, existing and proposed. Looking from the gas station up, existing and proposed building is just, you just barely see the new building in that photo. And this is the rear view seen from the aqueduct, that's before and after. This is another view a little further north. This is a view looking in the other direction from the aqueduct, before and after.
Anyone have any questions? Is there anyone from the neighbors that would like to speak on this application? Please come up and give your name and address, please.
Hi, Mike Merrill, 32 Walnut Street, kind of around the corner. Some of my comments on this, are partly related to the design, because we're talking about moving from a sort of residential house to a larger industrial style building. Part of that explains some of the variances that have been requested. Because for one, we're starting with a much different style of building as close to the road as the existing house is, which has obviously much smaller setbacks, so it skews the numbers, especially if you carve out the one example next to it. All of the rest of the industrial buildings, except for the one at the top of Hatch, are either set back farther like the one next door or hidden behind trees. So this one, we sort of put all of the stuff right up front and then built it to the back. So getting to my issues, one is with the variances. That's a function of trying to get into all of the space that isn't occupied by the normal, industrial rental units. And then also, as far as the variance for parking, we're talking about a self-created problem where there currently isn't a variance needed for parking because there aren't that many units. So we're going to put more units, and then we're also going to have the additional impervious space behind it to allow for a little less of an excess. But obviously, if it were slightly smaller, you wouldn't have that parking issue, and you wouldn't have the impervious space issue. As far as the impervious space, obviously, things roll downhill. If you put all of this on that lot, this is all going to come off of Broadway down the driveway and end up essentially on the Aqueduct Trail or going down the hill through that neighborhood instead of down the street or absorbed into the rest of the land that currently exists on the site. I don't know if there have been drainage approvals with the state, whether the state has agreed with that because it does abut the Aqueduct Trail. You know, obviously, you would think that that was also a question.
I do think the planning board addresses that in their approval process.
Okay, so some of that is
Yes.
addressed. But again, you know, one of the questions here would be, what would it take to actually comply with the requirements as well as solving some of these self-created problems? Right? Does it necessarily have to be 10 units in order to put a building on that lot, or something else viable? Right? Because what we're requesting is actually something that, you know, unless you're comparing it with a bad example, like I said, the one at the top of Hatch, which is sitting right on the corner, and it's kind of out of place in the context of Dobbsbury architecture. Even the one next door is well set back, which is why it gets excluded from the calculations for the purposes of something for a home that would be built next door to it, replacing the existing one. So, you know, I don't think that that's necessarily a mandate that if this lot isn't filled up, that it becomes unviable. Right, so I think there's got to be an option where we're not creating these new problems that have to be waived in order to get some, you know, fixed up building on that lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard? Brian, do we have cards back on this application?
This particular application was noticed to the planning board, and the only requirement is to be noticed to one of the boards within a year's time frame, and it has been noticed within a year's time frame to the planning board.
Okay, yeah, and
So noticing it has been completed per village standard.
okay, thank you. Yeah, and it has been on TV and at various meetings, I know.
Motion to close the hearing?
I have a question.
Your question?
Yeah,
Sure.
real quick.
Applicant or?
Of the applicant.
Sure.
Just so I'm reading this correctly, the only thing that's violating the required setback at the back of the lot is just the retaining wall for the parking spaces, is that right?
No,
It's not the building, as I'm seeing it, it's not the building itself, what it is it's that portion of the, it's parking only, right? And there's a retaining wall of sorts, I assume, that's,
Yes.
maybe is that right? Okay. Okay.
I would like to respond to the comment about, building things as far forward. Not only do we want this little green, just the green space, but.
Christina, could you
We're
talk,
able
use the
to
mic?
conceal all the cars, we're able to,
Yeah.
if we put the building back, we probably would end up with that parking area in the front. And the building next door has a big paved area in front. And also, I guess another response to comments about the number of units, on the neighborhood, this neighborhood plan. And this building has 59 units, this one has 6, and we're proposing 10. 8? Danny, 8? I'm sorry. Everything was not clear. Danny knows the neighborhood and family information, he's the owner of the property.
And am I right that the front setback it's only a portion of the decks that is bringing it over the front setback?
It's this corner here. This corner of these decks, we would have to eliminate the decks in the front to meet this setback. But having an outdoor space and a parking space for each unit is makes them more desirable.
Sure. The benefit of the village. Move to close.
Motion to close the hearing.
Second.
Second.
Pass. I move that the application be granted.
Second.
I'm in favor.
All in
Are we
favor?
taking the roll? Aye.
Okay. Good luck to you. The next application is a public hearing on an application filed by Roxana Klein Design, Inc., as agent for Lee Sanzari for 4 variances to construct 2 second-story additions on the property located at 41 Beechdale Road.
Mr. Chairman, I received a notice for this apparently because my house is within 200 feet. So I'm going to abstain and
Recuse yourself.
ask to be excused.
Okay,
Thank you.
you can even leave now.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Chairman. I think he felt fine. Do you concur? I mean, everyone else, the dormers on the second floor, if they've got a second floor, not on the third. It's all 4.5 spaces.
Good evening, I'm Roxana Klein for 41 Beechdale Road, representing Leah Zanzari and Patrick Widera. We are proposing, there's an existing 1.5-story house on the non-conforming lot. And we are proposing an extension and alteration to the house, turning it into a 2.5-story, enabling our homeowners to go from 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom on the second floor to get 3 bedrooms and 2 full bathrooms on the second floor, and having access to the third floor for a playroom. There is an existing garage, which, if you could go to the plan. Yes, There's an existing structure right here, which is the garage, that is about 3.14 feet away from the property line. And currently there is an opening between the garage and the house. So part of what we are asking is because there is an existing egress stair here. It's just an exterior stair that has become a real hardship because it's bringing water into their basement. It has direct access to their basement, and they've tried pretty much everything to resolve the water problem. Their basement has flooded several times, over 18 inches of water. So that's something that needs to be addressed. And in order to do that, the best solution really is to cover this area which will now connect the existing garage to the house. And that's in part why we need to ask for a variance, because in doing that, the existing garage will now be part of the house. So that's the number one thing. The second variance that we're asking for, and if we could go to the exterior elevations, to the proposed, well, go back to the first, to the plan. The house is currently, there is an existing, the existing footprint of the house is, if you can see, just moving as I go further. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. This is really the existing footprint of the house, and what we're proposing is expanding the front about 8 feet towards the front in order mostly to gain what we need for the second floor, where there will be 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. This is an existing family room that will remain untouched, and this is an existing deck that will remain untouched as well. So this is the connector piece that I was talking about that has to do with really resolving the water issue and also enabling them to have a very, very needed mudroom now that their family has grown and they will have no mudroom. So that would, take care of those 2 things. There is a third variance that we're requesting, which is really more of an aesthetic thing and has to do with the ridge height. And if you could see, I don't know if you can actually see the perspective, the exterior proposed view of the house, which is right here. Go back one. We are allowed 28 feet to the ridge, unless we go contextual, in which case we will be allowed 1.25 times of the average, but I don't think that we're only asking for 2'6" over the allowed ridge height, and it's really mostly because otherwise the pitch of the roof would be shallow and very unappealing. So really that's the reason why we're trying to go just 30 inches above the allowed ridge. It's mostly for aesthetic reasons. And then in terms of the front yard, we have a 30-foot front yard, except for this little area here, just that little area that jumps out about 2 feet.
Yeah, if you pulled that cart back, maybe people could see better.
The card, yeah?
If that were further this way, then you'd have room and
There you go.
could
Is
actually,
that better?
Perfect.
Can you all see? Sure. Yeah. Great idea. So this is the proposed,
yeah, we can see, but,
Yeah, this is-
you're pointing to things before, and
Okay, all right.
it's easier to
Thanks.
follow that.
Okay, good. And lastly, really because it's a non-conforming lot, that house would require a 50-foot aggregate with the 2 side yards, and obviously it's, when you go to the plan, if you can go to the side plan, that's right, to the first. Yeah, there we go. That is your 20-foot setback, and that would be a 30-foot setback, which goes through an existing house, obviously, because this is a non-conforming lot. So because we're, here you see shaded, just that's the area of the extension towards the front, and that's your 30-foot setback. So really, I mean, in order for us to extend that little piece is obviously as it is the rest of the house outside of the 30 foot. And that little area in front of, it's just part of the front porch, is encroaching on the front yard, which is really a necessity in terms of how we're trying to lay out their entry porch and leave it very in keeping with what they currently have, which is just very respectful of the rest of the neighborhood, I guess, and that's about it, really. I don't know if you have the opportunity to go through the drawings and if you have any questions. The other thing I do want to point out is over the garage, which is right here, the existing garage, which we're repairing because it's in not very good condition, to say the least. We're also asking to extend it about 3 feet to the front because it's really not, it's incredibly small as it is right now. So we're just asking for a 3-foot extension towards the front. And we are proposing an office on the second floor above the garage. And the way in which we dealt with that in terms of massing, because we're concerned about really keeping this as close as the existing non-conforming accessory building that's there right now, is we kept the pitch of the roof, or we're proposing the pitch of the roof front to back exactly as it is, and we're gaining the headroom required to really be able to use that second floor minimally, like the minimum required headroom, by adding a shed dormer towards the front and the back, as you can see on the perspective. So really, it's very similar in terms of mass in terms of the elevation facing the next door neighbor, except that a little bit higher. So that's pretty much the scope of the project.
Thank you. Brian, did we have cards back on this application?
Yes, 18 were sent, 15 were received, and 1 was returned.
Are they back from the neighbors? The nearby neighbors?
I don't know if this house next
Excuse
door.
me, I'm sorry, but I also sent via email an additional one that I just got yesterday. So it's, I believe, 15 plus 1 return. So that's, I think, 16 plus 1 that was returned.
We have 51, which must be next door. We got 29 on the same street, 50, 59, 48, 36.
Pictures, the neighboring pictures, which is
I'm not sure the house number immediately next door, 54. I would say we have the house next door as well. Every house is 31?
We do have them on either side?
31. It appears to be 31.
Can you talk a little bit, I guess the thing that strikes me in the application, after having driven the street a couple of times, is that at the far end, there's a lot of one-story houses. Closer to you, there are more 1.5 to 2-story houses where the second floor is really the dormer floor.
Right.
Your proposal has the third floor as the dormer floor, and it just seems to me that that it's not really in keeping with the rest of the neighbors.
This is the house directly across the street from them, which is almost identical to what we're proposing, except that it doesn't have dormers. It has windows at the gable ends. This is directly across the street from them. So I'm not sure if you saw that one, which is,
I did.
I can't really read, it's 26, 36, yes, I'm sorry, it's a little bit blurry. And this, which is the house if you're facing their house, the house to the left-hand side, as you can see, that is, I think, even higher than what we're proposing. So I think that in a way, the dormers, in a way, give that sort of third floor a reason to be, but I think that by keeping them, you know, small and really, I don't know, I feel that it really would work very, very well with the rest of the neighboring properties. And we've tried really, really hard to maintain the integrity and aesthetically of the rest of the neighborhood. Not to mention that the houses behind them and diagonally are way, way exceeding these heights, which I'm sure you know, which are really right next to their lot. They're right behind them. So in a way, this is actually a much more tamed and, you know, it's being expanded to the, you know, to, I think in a very respectful way, and really to accommodate their needs.
You saw the last application that the variances requested were of a relatively small magnitude. A foot here, 1% there.
Yeah,
Some of the variances you're requesting are of significant magnitude. And I understand that to a great extent, it's driven by the property you're working on. It's undersized and it's long and narrow,
right,
and your issues are on the side yard.
exactly.
And I understand that but there's a critical difference. And I'm not sure if I completely understand the explanation that you gave us before, that currently you have 24 feet on the minimum side yard. Prospectively, that gets reduced to 3 feet. Could you explain again
Yeah,
why we've gone from a relatively conforming or exceeding the
Yeah.
required side yard to a minimal side yard, which
Yes.
affects you on the
Yes,
single and on the double
that's-
side yard side?
And that is the biggest variance that we're requesting. There is an existing non-conforming accessory building there, which is the garage, which is currently 3.14 feet away from the property line. And you see it right here.
And
The
how
garage
far is the
exists
garage
there.
away from the house?
No, the garage is freestanding here, and it's
Okay.
3.14 feet away from the property line,
Right.
right? So, because we're covering this little open area, right, between the garage and the house, in order to resolve the water problem, mainly, really, that's why we're connecting it, mainly to resolve this big water issue, with the water going down through the egress stairs directly into their basement and flooding their basement. That's why this will now be considered part of the house. So the 24 feet, the original 24 feet goes from here to there, because this is an accessory building. That's why the 16-foot, exactly.
Gotcha.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, so from the
So
neighbor
the
to
building
that
is
side's
already
house,
there.
it's really no different.
No, exactly. So
It'd be
that's really what
Right.
drives the, that variance.
Yeah.
And it's important that I explain because, you know,
Yeah.
the building is already there. So,
Will you have sky exposure plane issues to deal with?
we have a minor encroachment, on, can you go to the last one, which is the sky exposure plane? Which will be addressed with the AHRB, obviously.
Yeah.
But, this is, here. This is obviously here, this is the front of the property, that's the back of the property. This has a minor little triangle there, and that is a minor little triangle there on the garage side. I don't know if you can see, but it's really, really small. And then here, there's almost none on that side, because of the way the property, I needed to look at this from both sides, because the
Right.
property slopes about 4 feet from front to back. So there is a little bit more in the front than there is in the back. So that's, yep,
With respect to the finished attic, you have dormers on the back and you have windows on either side as well, right? As well, in
Yes.
addition to the dormers in the front.
we have dormers facing the front and the back, and then we have 2 round windows
On
at
either
the
side.
ends, which are mostly for aesthetic reasons, really. You know, because I think that big triangle would, it's just, in terms of the massing of the house, and I think it's for that mostly.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I strongly feel that the more windows they can have, the better. Why not, if they have the space there? So, also, I don't know if you noticed, but we're trying to also break the scale by bringing this, by doing this kind of features on both sides, which I think also is minimizing the scale of the addition of the house. And,
I'd like to know if anyone else came to speak. Looks like there's at least one
Please.
person here.
Yep.
Few people.
Good evening. My name is Lee Root. I live at 87 Beachdale Road. She mentions the water in the basement. For 50 years, there's been an underground stream that inundates all the properties along Beachdale Road. She's not going to solve it. The thing that amazes me is I question whether a commercial enterprise, in having read the proposal, this was going to be a studio, which was a commercial enterprise. I wondered if Beachdale Road was zoned for commercial enterprises. That's the one thing that amazes me. Other than that, and the fact that her 2 dogs have been a blight on the neighborhood for as long as she's lived there, which is not going to be solved by you all. I thank you.
Please, ma'am.
may I ask a question? I'm not sure.
No.
Let's hear from.
I am Beatriz Ryan, 51 Beachdale Road, next door to the house of the proposer. And I only objected to the garage because they're saying that it's 3 feet. But in my books, it's only 1 foot away from my property line. The garage. And you know the requirements of, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. You know the requirements of the minimum square feet between one property and the other property. And this garage is 1 foot away from my property. So they want to build another floor on the top. I mean, I think it's, I oppose to that, I'm sorry. It will block my sunlight. So it's so close. I have 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms facing the garage. So you can imagine what would happen if you put another floor on the top. I mean, I was going to open my gate and see a wall in front of my house. I won't put this out a setback to the side. Okay?
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to be heard? No, is there anyone else who'd like to be heard?
May I have a question? So, I'm unsure about what, I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
No, you could ask us questions.
Oh, okay. I'm unsure about what the commercial enterprise he was referring to. I really don't know. I didn't understand that question, actually. I'm not sure about what a commercial enterprise means. This is a residential project in a residential neighborhood, so I'm not sure what that was referring to.
What you're putting on top of the garage is a
Home office.
home office. So
Yes.
I think he was referring to it as a commercial enterprise. I don't know if it's
Oh, no.
it's a,
No, it's just a home office,
Right.
and they both work full-time in the city, but the, sometimes needs to take, conference calls.
right.
Which I have seen her take in her car, literally. So that's really the whole reason to have a home office that's a little bit away from the mayhem of a 3-year-old running around in the house. That's really it. In terms of Ms. Beatrice's concern with the garage, which I understand, the way in which we really dealt with this is we tried to minimize the massing as much as we could while giving them what they need. And that's why we pitched the roof exactly the way it is, but just a little bit higher, so it really does not, it really is not like a big wall with a full second floor. It really wouldn't be that. And the only way in which we're achieving the headroom is by adding this shed dormers, and we did that specifically to minimize the massing and to keep it as the small garage that is there currently.
Do you have a slide that shows the comparison of the after and the current garage?
I have an existing, can you go to the existing?
Do you have the existing height
Yes,
of the
yes,
existing garage?
right. So the existing height is, and I think because I can't really read that, it's 11.4, but I want to say the right thing. I can't really read that, I'm sorry.
No, the former applicant was having the same problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's in the drawings.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, yeah, probably.
There it is.
Yeah.
7.2 and 11.9. So the 7'2" eave goes as high as 12, and then and the 11'9" ridge height goes to 17.5, right? Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's
Good.
a little less than 6 feet.
So that's really it. It's really not a full second story that we're proposing.
But I understand the questioner's intent.
Yes,
You know, it's one thing that the property is still, whether it's 1 foot or 3 foot away from the property lines. It's another
it's
thing
3.14.
about the height. And I don't know whether you've done any studies which would have examined, given the angle of the sun, whether or not she's gonna no longer have natural light into those bedrooms that face that property, because it's as close as it is, as opposed to if it didn't have, if it was the standard minimum side yard variance, she would receive the natural light into her house.
Well, right, that's what I was gonna say. Can we go to the picture that shows, I actually have a picture. It's it's actually very
Not more.
heavily screened. There's a lot of trees between the bedrooms and Miss Beatrice's house, you know, bedrooms and bathrooms and the garage and the existing garage, which is exactly where we're keeping it. I think this is a good picture.
In a way, I don't even think the height of the garage is the major issue with respect to sun. I think the height of the house. If you look at 1.4 and then you switch over to 4.2, you see the two front elevations right next to each other, and you actually see that what's really, I think, driving height of the house is the main roof, right? That's really, it's not the garage.
Here, this is
Which
the-
is still,
this
which
is
is not
the-
to say it's not a problem.
No, I understand your concern. But this is the area in,
Yep.
do you see the picture?
No, yeah, I've been.
Can you see it? I think it's easier to just,
Ms. Klein, will you end up rebuilding this garage? Because it looked like it was in less than great shape,
Yeah.
right? And so in order to put an extra level on it, my guess is that when the contractor gets into it, he may just be rebuilding this garage.
Hopefully not. Hopefully the footings, foundation will be okay, but minimally repairing it because it's in complete disrepair. And also, I mean, we're going, or they're going through this whole exercise of beautifying their house. The garage should be beautiful part of the house. And that's what we're intending to do, and that's why we're proposing that with this, what I think will be a beautiful mudroom. And we really worked hard on trying to minimize the messing of this, but we must connect it to the house in order to resolve the water issue. And they went as far as to really look into, would this be hydrostatic pressure going, like they looked into every single thing when they got to flood number 1, flood number 2, it's been a major problem. So that that area between the house and the garage must be covered, in order to resolve this. There is no other way, or I don't see any other way. And of course it will be civil engineered to drain this entire thing properly. That's gonna happen, so just to give you peace of mind in terms of the drainage, because we're not going to create, resolve a problem to create somebody else's problem. So.
What's the floor to ceiling height on the proposed second floor?
8 feet. They currently have 7'5" ceiling height. So it's not that we're keeping the existing 8-foot ceiling height on the first floor, and we're increasing just to have an 8-foot ceiling on the second floor. And then the third floor really is just whatever you have. It's not that we're increasing the height to gain a third floor. The plates, that's where your roof comes down right there. So whatever we have available to turn that third floor and make it accessible into a playroom will use it. That's about it, but we're not having a true third floor. That's a half a story. Obviously, we're not allowed to have a full third floor, so yeah. And I don't think it would be adequate either, even if we were allowed to go any higher with the height. With the house, I meant to say.
I don't mean to be picky on the height, but how do you say that that's not a full third floor? I mean, you've got it built out as usable space.
Well, if you have an accessible attic, that would be the same without dormers, really. If you look at the section,
But you do have dormers.
Right, but I think the dormers are actually a terrific feature to the house.
I think insofar as it's under a roof, it's 2.5 stories, so
It is a 2.5
I think
story,
she's
but
technically saying it's not a third floor, but to your point, it's occupiable space on a third level, so
Yes,
it might be a
it's a half a-
technicality that we're talking about in terms of how we're referring to it.
If you look at the plans,
Yeah.
you don't have access, like all of this is, you don't have headroom. From a certain point over, it's like walking into an attic, except that you're adding the headroom by adding the dormers and making it usable, which I think is a great idea.
I have no
More
further
questions?
questions.
Move to close.
Second.
In favor.
All in favor? Someone want to make a motion? I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to vote with other people. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I on a non-conforming lot especially, I think it's pushing it a little too much, so. I would make a motion to deny the application.
Yeah, I'll second it. I just have an issue with with what, the third floor and dormers on, up the third level, and it just seems to me that it's not in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood, and while it's not an excessive differential, it's
There's no
to
question
me-
of the zoning?
Well, she's here asking for a variance to the zoning. You know, and so I'd be voting with the motion as well.
I have to say, when we look at the 5 factors that we're supposed to look at, I don't see an undesirable change to the neighborhood. I see an improvement. So I don't see that there's anything that shows an undesirable change to the neighborhood. You're talking about the particular benefit. I haven't heard how the benefit can be obtained through any other method, which is our second factor that we have to look at. So what is it that the applicant could change which would achieve the purpose that they want? While it appears to be a substantial area variance, based on what we saw, it's really not in the context of that. I don't consider that to be substantial, and what you're doing is you're just connecting it to the garage. So how is it a substantial variance? So when you're looking at all the 5 factors, I don't see it, and I also see that, you know, it's gonna have an adverse impact. I mean, I understand there's one neighbor who's concerned about the views, but overall, I think you get a better property in the neighborhood. So when you look at it in that sense, how is it weighed against the 5 factors we have to look at?
I don't disagree. I think that actually overall would be an improvement to the house, but I don't think that this is the only way to get that improvement. I think that if you look at the other houses, nearly all of them are 1.5 story, 1.5 floor, in the immediate adjacent area. I'd probably be more open to it if the dormers on the front of the house went away, making it appear to be more of a 2-story instead of a 2.5 story house. I don't think that the only way to fix the flooding problem is to cover the breezeway or to make a breezeway. You have plenty of room in the back, and I think to potentially relocate the garage. So putting a second floor on the garage, it's a tight lot as it is, and I think that making that volume immediately next to the property line that much higher, I think it has an effect on the neighboring property. Is it so much of an effect that it affects the property value of that house? Probably not, but I just think that while the proposal is an improvement on the residents, I think the proposal is not the only way to do what the owners would like to do with the property.
So the question the challenge that I heard is an interesting one. And I don't know whether when you were doing your options, you considered rather than reorienting the house, so to speak, so that the garage property and the office was taking advantage of the length of the property rather than crowding the width of the property. Was there any possibility of exploring that option?
Do we need to reopen? I'm not a lawyer.
No, we can have.
We're okay to dialogue after. Thank you.
I'm not sure I'm understanding.
Well, My colleague's question was,
Yeah.
when you merge the 2 properties, it creates a very tight mass running on the width. And the house has more room going on the depth side. Is there any option that you explored?
There's an existing family room that we're not touching towards the back of the house. So there's so much we can do in terms of moving backwards and not covering.
Could the house expand towards the rear rather than towards the side? Could the garage have been relocated? Could there have been a connection through a mudroom? I'm just asking, could you have taken your design and rotated it?
What I'm trying to say is that this, which is an existing family room in the back of the house, we're not touching it. So we tried to, whatever we are expanding to go forward, because we really, if we were going back, we'd be covering the existing family room. It wouldn't really work in terms of massing. We actually looked into that, and it wasn't working very well at all. I'm a little bit concerned with the eliminating the dormers, and also concerned about having an office over the garage, because you would be basically denying them the opportunity to have a home office one way or another if they can't have access to doing either the second floor or half a story over the garage and also not having full access to the third floor. So I'm not sure.
I don't think that my comment about, at least about the attic space prevents possibility of having an occupiable attic space. I think that my concern is really more about the streetscape and the context of this house relative to other houses around it. So you're putting dormers, you're basically making a 1.5 story into a 2.5 story house where
Yes.
there really is not, most of the houses around there are 1.5 story or 2-story homes. So I think that by doing away with the dormers on the front of the house, you're not doing away with the possibility of having a third level attic. I think that you're just trying to downsize the house a bit from the front. So my concern is really about the surrounding
No,
the
just
context.
to clarify, we are allowed to have they are allowed to have a 2.5 story house there. Yes.
Fair enough, but you're asking for a height variance.
Right.
So you can
Yes.
do the 2.5 story house without the variance.
Yeah, but the height variance is not created by the dormers.
No, it has
Correct.
nothing to do with it also. It
Right.
has to do really
So-
with the pitch being too shallow if we don't go up the 2'6" that we're asking for. So, I mean, it really is more of an aesthetic.
Yeah.
That particular thing is more of an aesthetic. And if you see the elevation with a shallower roof, I'm sure you would agree. It's just.
Can I just add, I happen to walk my son, I was down this block, my 2-year-old son, just about every day or every other day. And anecdotally, he gets a lot of enjoyment out of the 2 dogs, but putting that aside, I think the characterization that this house as proposed would be out of character is maybe more directed towards the houses down, much further down towards the end of the block, but certainly not as you approach this particular house or the surrounding houses. If anything, I think it brings it more to be within the character of the houses that are there. And that's from somebody who walks this block just about every day, for some context.
But no one has dormers on the 3rd floor facing the street.
The house to the
Those are not
left.
before us, though. That's for the AHRB to decide.
Right.
It's not for
It's
us.
not our issue.
It's not our issue.
Right, but
It is not our issue. The height is our issue.
but it's why they're asking for.
But not the
height
dormers. No, not to do the dormers. If it came in without the dormers on it, they'd still be coming with a variance. So, 2 separate issues. And they're within zoning for 2.5 stories. So, again, that's not the issue.
Right.
I think we're focusing, as, respectively to my fellow board members, on, a design issue which is not really before us. As to whether the side setback variance, I think, that's an issue which I can understand, but I think if we would have to reopen the hearing if we want to explore further what other options that they looked at in order to satisfy that there was no other viable means to address your concern.
Paul, I agree with you. I think there are some issues we're discussing that are architecture review board issues and aren't our issues. I think on the zoning side, the issue I do have is the one I didn't explain clearly enough to you. When I look at the site plan, I understand you don't want to touch the back. Different question. I understand that you've got a lot of property in the back. And in theory, to avoid some of the variances, you could, rather than attach the garage to the main house, you could relocate the garage to the rear of the house. How you could, if need be, you could have an office built on top of the garage to the rear of the house, in which case you would solve your drainage problem differently. You'd solve it by grading your land away from the house and et cetera, and you would not have the need for the side yard variances at all. So that's all I was thinking with respect to the comment, is that there are other layouts that would take advantage of your length without creating the need for the side yard variances. And that was the question I had, was whether it may not be the most preferred option or the easiest option, but it's a viable option to avoid the variances.
And we would still need a variance, a different type of variance if we were to tear down the garage where it currently is, which is a non-conforming accessory structure. and rebuild another one in the back. I think.
You'll
that
have
would-
plenty of room in the back to do that, from what I can see from your side plan. You've got an excess of land back there.
But we would still, we
You
have.
might still need a
family
height
room.
variance, but that would be the only one you might be asking for.
I think it would also be a cost issue because we would have to, what you're suggesting is we would have to build a whole new structure. Whereas here, we're really repairing the existing garage and just roofing over this existing open area, which really is the only viable option to resolve that water going down the egress stairs. I know you're saying that there are other ways to resolve that water issues, but to my knowledge, there aren't, and they really looked
You
at
can
many
create a
different
berm,
options. and spoke
there's some
to-
civil engineering type issues.
Exactly,
that
exactly,
you could do.
which will be addressed with a civil engineer for sure.
Yeah, just as a point of order, we should reopen if we're going to continue to take new information from the applicant, so I'll move to reopen the hearing.
Second.
And-
So,
Maybe
and I think that the.
we recognize the
I would like to just want to address one thing. I'm familiar with the properties there. Is there a rock outcrops in the backyard if you were to move and have to do anything or in the yard if you were to move the garage? I mean, there is some rock and maybe the property.
Do you have to
owner would do
blast,
something.
is really the question.
Yeah, so,
You can come up and talk if you want to.
Hi, I'm Leah Senzari. So we've lived in the house for 10 years, and it's a 2-bedroom home, and we've been exploring for the last 2 years on moving. But we love Dobbs Ferry, and we love our street, we love our neighbors, and we keep coming back to not wanting to move. So we have been exploring what we can do with the house and the property in the most respectful way to the neighbors and the neighborhood for years. I don't respectfully understand the suggestion of moving the garage because it's a very narrow lot. And if we were to move the garage somewhere in the back, we would still be affecting our neighbors. We now might not, we may now be affecting the neighbor behind us. Right now, we have 18 spruce trees that we put in to separate. So, and then we would be driving past our neighbor's home. I don't see how that's a viable option. When I bought the house, there was the back family room, the great room, which had been a prior addition. The great room itself, which is a beautiful and the heart of the house, creates many limitations as to what we can do. So the only way we were able to get the square footage was to build out the 8 feet in the front, which doesn't, right now, those are pine trees, so it's just the same distance. It doesn't really change how close the house is to the front. The water problem, I've been having Dobbs Ferry Fire pump us out every time we flood. We've had civil engineers, we have French drains, we have new sump pumps, we've explored everything. And the consistent answer that we receive is you have to cover the stairs. So that is the reason we've tried to cover that breezeway, the stairwell. And the way we're trying to do it is in the most non-offensive way. And we're also hoping to, that we've put in drains, we've put in extra drains, we've done everything, and we haven't yet solved the water problem. So I just want you to appreciate the amount of thought that we have put into this endeavor. And we don't want to leave the street, and we don't want to leave Dobbs Ferry, and we've been looking for years. Every single thing we've proposed has been the only options we really have. We don't have a usable basement. I'm an attorney in Manhattan. I take calls. I don't have any office space to work. I literally take conference calls from my car. It's crazy. I actually think, from what we've looked at, homes with outdoors are aesthetically not as attractive. There's a whole slew of homes down south of Broadway that have been more recently built without dormers, and we don't actually think that looks good. Our neighbors across the street, similar height, next to us, higher height, behind us, higher height. So again, I just really want you to understand how much time and energy and money we've spent in trying to do this in the most acceptable way. I don't think putting the garage anywhere else is an option.
I want to tell you, I appreciate your answer. Your answer was what I was looking for, because I wanted to understand that you had considered all the options that were available. And see, what Paul Monte was going to was a set of 5 standards that we have to be sure the applicant has visited before we grant the variance. And one of them was to make sure that if there were other options which didn't require certain variances, you had explored them. And your answer provides that.
Thank you.
Intelligence.
We even considered cutting the back great room and having a crane try to pick it up and move it. And it was all so crazy, and then we thought, wait a second, can we just add a little in the front of the house? So we really have spent a lot of time trying to think through it. I respect my neighbors on both sides. We love our neighbors, we love our neighborhood, and we don't want to move, and we would never want to do anything to offend them in any way. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anything
You
else?
have a question?
I would, first, I would thank you for pointing out the issue with the dormer. I think you're right on that. My sensitivity still is primarily to just overbuilding lots at the end of the day, right? So this is one of those projects where it's a little bit difficult because what you're proposing is significantly better than what's there, I think aesthetically. But I think it's too much for this lot. It's already a non-conforming lot. So, and I'm sensitive to neighbors who are, you know, they're gonna bear some of the consequence. So maybe I was focusing on dormers in an incorrect way. However, I think there's still, despite the fact that there are houses on the street that have had additions, on this particular lot, where it's so tight, it's just becoming tighter, so.
Yeah, most of the requests, I think, are fine. You know, I am hung up on dormers relative to the height, you know, in that the other houses that have dormers that are nearby are second-floor dormers, they're not third-floor dormers. You know, if the AHRB were to come back to us and say, you know, this roof is a lot better with the variance than without the variance, I'd gladly yield, but to me, without that, that's a hurdle I just can't get over, you know, because, you know, it's just a little too much for me.
You haven't been before the AHRB yet, have you?
No.
So,
No. My question to you is the ridge height and the pitch of 8 and 12 that we're trying to achieve in order for this to look really nice and not to look, you know, how sometimes you look at these houses that have a very shallow roof and they start looking a lot less appealing. So the ridge height.
That's why I say that the people that make that decision are a different board, you know, and.
Of course,
if-
I know, yes.
So-
But what I'm saying is the ridge height and the dormers are 2 separate issues. So I guess what we're asking for the, for the extra 30 inches in ridge height is regardless of the dormers or the non-dormers, because
Correct.
we need that aesthetically no matter what. If we have the dormers or non-dormers, which I understand will be addressed with AHRB, the dormers or non-dormer thing, which I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to propose, unless there's somebody out there who has another question, that we reclose the hearing and take a vote. Since there's
Sure.
5 of us, I'm not sure which way the
Right.
vote's going to go. But we should probably take the vote based on the zoning issues and provide direction and guidance.
Absolutely.
So a motion to close?
Second?
I'm going to,
All in favor?
do you want to go through with your original motion?
Why don't you restate the motion?
You know,
As you-
that would
as
be,
you-
probably be more,
I was
make
going
more
to do
sense.
motion to approve the application.
second. favor?
Yep,
It's three.
yeah, 3. And we're against. So good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You very rarely get 3 to 2 votes.
You know, but that's good.
Yes, it is. We had a good discussion.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure which way I was voting until the.
Take care. Thank you.
Well, you know, there's a lot of close stuff. And I do think at the end of the day, even though you can think about moving the garage,
I just needed them to think that they looked at it, because otherwise, if I don't know, I don't know what they've done. You know, it's funny, when I'm sitting.